Relations for TA and Employer Planning for India. On behalf of all of us here at Cargill India and our partners at People Connect, we thank you for making time today and joining us for this very important SheMaker Roundtable. Let me assure you that with our lineup of industry experts dwelling deeper into next-gen manufacturing, sustainability, and fostering DI in the sector, you will all leave inspired after today's discussion. So in today's rapidly evolving manufacturing landscape, companies face unprecedented challenges where meeting customer demands and staying ahead of the curve is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a mounting need to minimize environmental impact and operate responsibly. Well, picture a world where manufacturers are responsible and ensure there's a mounting need to minimize environmental impact and operate responsibility. Well, picture a world where manufacturers prioritize waste reduction, energy conservation, and environmental protection, all while ensuring operations excellence. Shifting towards sustainability isn't just a pressing trend. It's not just a passing trend, It's fundamental reimagination of manufacturing, which can be possible by reshaping success to encompass all: financial prosperity, social impact, and environmental stewardship. So, to dwell deeper into this transformative journey, we have now lined up a panel discussion on next-gen manufacturing, pioneering sustainable practices and smart technologies for operational excellence, to be moderated by Christina Benjamin, Sustainability Leader for Cargill Food Solutions, South Asia Operations. With over 14 years of hands-on experience in food and agriculture manufacturing sector, spanning across 3 countries, Christina is committed to integrate environmental and social considerations into business strategies. Her expertise on sustainability in manufacturing industry positions her as an ideal moderator for this very important session. Over to you, Christina. Request you to please introduce our esteemed panelists and lead this discussion. Thank you.
Let me have the privilege of welcoming my panelists here who I've gotten to know in the couple of minutes that I've had with them. We'll start off with Chaudhary. She's a partner and a global head at ESG at Unicus Consultech. She's a visionary ESG leader with over 2 decades of experience, who has deep understanding of the mechanisms to create real business value from socially and environmentally responsible business strategies. She has worked on over 400 projects over 5 continents and 15 countries. She has served as an advisor to international organizations in Europe, Asia, and Africa, including the United Nations. She has liaised effectively between these businesses, policymakers, governments, and regulators to propel climate risk-based strategies and bridge related knowledge and capability gaps. Thank you, Anu, for being here. My next panelist is Ragini Pasumarthy, Deputy GM at Tata AutoComp. She comes to us with a strong background in engineering, manufacturing, and innovation-driven leadership. She currently oversees business excellence and strategic management for 22 business units and joint ventures companies globally for Tata AutoComp, which is about 55 manufacturing locations. Her leadership is driving Tata Business Excellent Management assessments and implementing improvements across that has won her a lot of awards. Ragini is committed in sustainability leadership. She has a passion for driving positive change both within the organization and in the broader social context, which underscores her as one of the forward-thinking leaders in the automotive industry. Thank you, Ragini. My next panelist, Priya B., Director at Ernst & Young. Priya serves as the Director, Climate Change and Sustainability Services. She brings about 2 decades of extensive experience in ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance, as well as CSR and climate change domain. Her diverse skill sets encompasses sustainable strategy development on resource efficiency, spanning energy, carbon, water, waste, supply chain management. Priya has also worked with multilateral agencies such as the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and the International Finance Corporation on low carbon growth and waste management policy development at India level. She serves as a dedicated advocate for DEI, diversity and inclusiveness, and talent development within her own organization of Ernst & Young. Thank you, Priya. The next person that I have such a privilege of introducing is Mr. Paneesh Rao, Chief Sustainability at LTI Mindtree. Mr. Paneesh is a senior leader with more than 3 decades of experience in managing human resources across industries and geographies. In his current role, he drives LTI Mindtree's ESG commitment, vital to the company's vision of balancing growth and sustainability. He also leads the CSR, which is the Corporate Social Responsibility Program, and DEI. I also know him as a seasoned moderator who balances complex topics with honesty, humor, encouraging interesting and open conversations. So I'm really excited to have all of you on board, and I'm going to jump right into the conversations for today. Thank you. So today we're going to have a group of very interesting, as you might have already seen, a very interesting panel. We're going to be starting off with some topics on manufacturing, and we have a very good expert here with us. And then we're going to jump right into topics of environmental and social sustainability, integrating that into manufacturing. How does all of this come together, or does it come together? And then we're going to move on to a topic of, a very interesting topic of social integration and any kind of design biases. I think we briefly touched on something along those topics, but getting into that and closing it out with how do we measure progress and how do we communicate this progress across. So let me start off my first question here. And of course, we'll start off talking about what are the emerging trends do you see shaping the future of sustainable manufacturing, and how do we leverage that? And we'll start off with you, Ragini. That's okay. I think it's just on. It's on already.
Yeah.
Start off with you.
Yes, yes.
All right.
So, Christina, the basic shift in mindset, from thinking linear to thinking circular, the shift from, you just take it, make and sell, to the entire concept of circularity on how do you bring in within the design concept, or what are you doing with that commodity or the part, how do you reuse it, how do you, want to make it renewable, kind of. For example, we at Tata AutoComp, we are into, making battery packs for electric vehicles, and there are lot many, lithium ion cells. So even before you start making the packs, we have to have strategies for, what are you going to do with those cells that go bad? How are you going to reuse them? What are your action plans for that? And also there is something called the second life of the battery pack. So in automotives, the health of the battery pack, if it is, you can put it in a vehicle until it is, running at 70% of its health. So what after that? How are you going to reuse it? So we are very rigorously working with companies like the power segment and all to use the same battery pack for stationary purposes. I mean, it is just used as a battery storage system and not put into the electric vehicles. So that is something that is, very rigorously being worked on. The second piece is, of course, on renewable energy, use of renewables. The solar, how can you do with bio energy and wind energy and stuff like that. And particularly for the automotive industry, lightweighting, use of alternate materials, composites, how do you replace the traditional steel, the traditional aluminum and plastics. So in fact, we are working very strongly on, how do you infuse jute into plastic and get the same kind of strength of material and also durability. Those are some of the major shifts, and also, lightweighting becomes very important when I was recently having a conversation with Mr. N. Ramanathan on one of those ISQ forums, and he just asked me, you come from the automobile industry, so what is the average weight of a human being? So it is somewhere around 60 to 80. And then what is the average weight of a car that you make? So that is 1500 to 2000 kilos. So does that really make sense to transport a human of, 80 kilos? You are making something which is 2000 kilos. So that's where all the innovation comes. The thinking, that is a major shift, that is a major trend that not only automobiles, even the entire manufacturing segment is working on. And then there is, of course, we had a wonderful session on how smart manufacturing, how the entire AI ML piece is coming on, and how you are, reducing waste, making it very lean with the use of automation. And thinking that also bundling your services, today in manufacturing, for example, all the assets that we have, the machines, the PLC systems, the drives, that not only what we produce, but what we require as a manufacturing industry, we don't buy them anymore. You just give a contract. It is like passing on your products as a service. You buy those services, you get those equipments, you use it, and then, it is sent back to the manufacturer for reuse. So these are some of, the trends that probably the industry is working on.
Thank you, Ragini. But now I'd like to open it up to the rest of you. If you also have any thoughts, please do share. I like the way that she touched on the topic of making something that's proportional to the service needed, right? Like if I can generalize it, like a person having a car of such a big size car, but also the emissions associated, all of that. So I'm very thankful for that, and also for the jute mixing. That was the first time I've ever heard of it. So thank you for that. Yes. Anyone else want to talk about? Yeah.
Well, you know what? Very interesting innovation you bring, and you talk of sustainability in what you do. I think the future and the real test of a good economy is less of individual vehicles and more of public transport. And I think we should start thinking of that and embrace that. And unfortunately, there's going to be a little bad news for the automobile industry.
We are still leasing away to the public sector.
Yeah.
There are a lot of leasing models when.
No, I'm talking of Tata in general and motor companies in general.
Yeah.
Very true. Okay.
So I think Ragini has very well covered all the relevant points here, so I wouldn't repeat that. But the only thing I guess I'd like to add is on the value chain and how to make that as well more efficient. So while we're talking about circularity, extremely important of course, but then things that you still need to consume, in the form of raw material, how do you make that more sustainable, and how do you ensure that your entire value chain and not just your own company or your own product is produced responsibly is something that is also extremely critical today. And the amount of investment that is going into R&D, of course there's room for a lot more. We need to channel it in the right direction. We cannot have a very narrow view of what is sustainable. We have to have a very holistic view. So we've seen in the past, very recent past, that investments are going into, say, an environmentally sustainable product, but that may not be socially responsible. So we have to have that holistic view. We have to change the definition of what is sustainable in a way. Yeah, just wanted to add.
Thank you for that. And I think it's a really complicated or a complex problem as well, right? In terms of lithium, for example, and its resource, it's a finite resource. Anything that we talk about resource-wise is finite, whatever alternatives that might come up. So very good topics. So that actually leads me right into my next topic of our conversations around what are some of the key challenges and opportunities in integrating such sustainability related, which is environmental and social, into current manufacturing operations practices. For that, I would like to invite Priya, our expert on that, to start off the conversation.
Thank you, Christina. So I think before we even get on to the challenges, right, what I want to highlight is ESG or sustainability has now become a stakeholder ask. People don't essentially come to us saying, what is sustainability? Now they understand the importance of it, they understand the criticality of it, they want to understand the how of ESG. So there is that mind shift change that has happened, and that is also driven by the stakeholder ask. So whether it's an investor, whether it's a customer, consumer, they want to be associated with a company, an organization or a brand who's responsible. So that is a good shift, clearly. The other interesting thing that has happened is the investors actually ranking organizations based on their ESG performance. So it is based on public disclosure, it is based on how your performance has been year on year. And publicly you just think of a company, go on to say multiple ESG rating companies that you have. You can very, very understand saying on 100, where do you stand? Or say for example on a AAA rating, where do you stand? On a risk-based rating, where do you stand? So organizations have started taking sustainability a lot more seriously. It has to be integrated into your business strategy. It cannot be a silos function anymore. Having said that, from a challenge perspective, so if you are an organization beginning this journey, the first thing is to understand who owns it. Who's going to drive sustainability, who should take accountability for it. So another thing which I wanted to say is that it cannot be managed by a sustainability team and they running the entire thing. It has to be cross-functional. You will have to have accountability from the HR, from the manufacturing, to the business, planning, production. All of them have an equal role to play to ensure sustainability is integrated and it actually functions and achieves the goals and targets that we want to put together. So while it might seem like a challenge, the opportunity side of it is clearly that you get the stakeholder buy-in, people are convinced that it is a good thing to do, and therefore achieving your goals targets becomes a lot more simpler. It's seamless, it just flows. So that's clearly, the stakeholder buy-in becomes like a first area. Second thing is people have this misconception that sustainability can be cost intensive. It is like, where do I get the budget from? Why should I have another area? But if you think of it, all environmental related parameters will give you a direct cost benefit. They are all tangible. Whether it is energy, water, waste, anything that you do there, you will see it in your, in your P&L. All your social related impacts, so whether you're talking about talent, whether you're talking about DEI, you're talking about human rights, they all have an intangible benefit. So in either way, the cost related aspect of sustainability will get balanced out. So that's also taken care of. The third thing is the data. That is also a big deal, right? You don't know where we need to start from, what gets measured, gets managed as well. So it's okay to bring in that efficiency, to understand where you are, and then you have a goalpost saying, this is where I am, this is my baseline. If I want to become carbon neutral, if I want to reduce my water, my dependency on, say, groundwater resources, whatever it can be, very easy to have those milestones in place. Then you have your, who does it, how much time do I need, how does it get done, all of that, the approach it'll just fall into place. The last challenge that I see is definitely the value chain. I think Anu also sort of spoke about it, why globally, again, they don't look at only the manufacturing side of the entire value chain of a product. The upstream and downstream also has to be sustainable. While it is a challenge to bring some of your smaller suppliers on board, the opportunity that you will have to look at is that the long-term relationship that you build with your partners, and clearly you're making them realize the benefit of sustainability. Having said that, I just want to conclude saying that while you have the ESG sustainability, which is a new area of opportunity, having role of women, I cannot emphasize how critical it is, because the leadership or the style of leadership that they bring in, a lot more empathetic, a lot more smarter, I think it will definitely have a very large impact in having women in manufacturing, and especially if you're women in sustainability, you can clearly see the difference. So yes, that's all I have. Thank you.
I think those are very, very important to remember, that we are part of a global, it's not just stockholders anymore, we're moving on to stakeholders, and all of them have, even though we might not even realize that they are stakeholders, they can have a huge influence on our business and its continuity. So thank you for shedding light and bringing our minds back to that. But I do want to give an opportunity to the other panelists, if you have anything to add on, anything that you would like to, in addition to what she has shared.
I think very well said, Priya. And talking of diversity in sustainability, and must compliment that this is a SheMaker Roundtable, and heartening to see so many women outnumbering the number of men in the room. And also to say that in this panel, somehow it's all women and just me, I don't know why. And I have also been cornered. That's by design. I didn't know, I wouldn't have fallen into this trap if I had known.
Hey, this is our normality, so welcome to the chair.
So, yes, it makes a huge difference. I think in sustainability, that's one of the measurement parameters of the percentage of women in the total work group, and also women in leadership. And I think, extending that beyond just binary men and women, talking about LGBTQ+, talking about veterans, talking about people with disability only, further, emphasizes what diversity means. Very important to focus on all these things.
agree, and that very nicely gets me into the
Just
next.
adding, Priya was talking about ESG departments and teams being isolated, whose responsibility is to drive sustainability in the organizations. So while at Tata AutoComp, when 2-3 years back, when we were setting up the entire sustainability targets and aligning ourselves with the Tata Group goals, so by design in Tata AutoComp, we have decided, so we are a company under which there are 18 different business units manufacturing different kinds of auto components, and they are all independent businesses on their own. They have their own boards, their own CEOs. And so in none of our 18 business units, we have created a separate sustainability department. It is only the engineering and operations team leading the sustainability initiatives supported by the HR and finance for SNG. So that is the kind of teams we have curated for driving sustainability, and believe me, it's really working very well.
You know, I must also say that if you were to segment the businesses by the size and by the industry that they belong to, I think the maturity levels are at very, very different stages. And while we believe that in the companies that we come from, we take sustainability very, very seriously, I think I must also say that many do it because it's a statutory requirement, and many do it because, it's going to fetch them business. If they don't do it, they probably wouldn't be in business. So I think that has to change from being more cautious, conscious, and leaving a better world for the future generation to come, than being statutorily forced to do it because if you didn't do it, there's going to be a penalty and stuff like that. It's got to be part of your life, right? Till that happens, and I must share with you that I saw this in social media, in LinkedIn or somewhere. Indore is the cleanest city for a very long time in India, and I believe the vendors there have dustbins, right? The street vendors have dustbins, large bins, and what they have also done is they have put a rangoli around that dustbin. And so much so there is public participation in keeping the city clean, that if you were an outsider and by mistake you threw anything on the road, there will be somebody from behind who will call you and say, put it in the bin, right? So that is public participation. I think till we reach there, it's not going to be the best. And I do hope that all of us carry this. More than companies doing, I think sustainability is when we individuals start practicing it personally and in our homes.
True, I think, and definitely there's a collective responsibility, and then there's an individual responsibility, both outside and in the workplaces. And I like how both of you shared about integrating these into the different objectives of the entire organization, because it's definitely not a one-person thing that happened. It's definitely not going to be a one person that's getting that act together. So it's really good to have to remind ourselves also of the responsibility that citizens need to carry. And I think we were talking about the state of Kerala a little bit earlier, where public responsibility, civic behavior, trash and waste management, segregation, so many things come into play. So with that individual component, I'm going to now get the question on, how do we influence builders of technology to ensure that they are intentionally including people and the environment into their design and testing? Pretty much, how do they address designer bias before these new technologies and things that are coming up right now, like one of the very good examples Ragini just shared, but how do we influence that? And so I would like you to start off on that.
See, I don't think builders of technology bias any technology by gender. A technology is built and it's just adopted irrespective of the gender that you are. It's artificial intelligence, I think, was spoken about, and I believe it's all about data that you put in is the output that you get, basis which you make lots of decisions. Therefore, I think elimination of any bias when you put data into artificial intelligence for it to make predictions, and especially with regards to gender, I think one has to be very careful. That's the only bias I would say. Otherwise, technology per se, and I remember when My father bought the first car in our family, a Fiat car. The steering was almost impossible for a young boy like me in those days, to drive the car very easily, maneuver it. Then came the power steering. Right, with a finger now, you can turn the car 360 degrees. It's not an effort anymore. You now therefore see women driving big trucks, and you wonder how do they drive. It's just because they are all powered, and therefore it's easy, and it doesn't require any physical labor to drive them. You see women in driving metro trains. You see them driving flying airplanes. There are more women pilots, I think, nowadays than men pilots, at least the Indigo that I fly. So, I think women are there from space to earth everywhere. Very heartening to see so many women from manufacturing attending this SheMaker Roundtable. And we do some skilling of women to operate large machines in factories, which was only men's job once upon a time. The environment has changed hugely to accept women on the shop floor. They are operating machines, and I believe because of which the accidents on the shop floor have hugely reduced because they are more careful. They have more focus on the job that they do, and they're more mindful when they do. They don't have any distraction, I believe. So I think I won't discriminate technology by gender. I would say it's adoption, and therefore it's also the data that we put in for any future forecasting and analysis that we do, whether it's for whatever reason, right? So I would that's my thought.
And I think I would like to also ask the other panelists, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that? In terms of designer bias, can a technology be biased through design, or do we see examples of it, and what do you think about it?
So sometimes I think it's a good thing, because it depends on the product and which consumer it's catering to. So say for example, jewelry. Again, there is a little bit of a bias because a lot of women use jewelry. So even the karigars, okay, the people they're mostly women. So they want to understand the consumer mindset, they want to understand client centricity. So they therefore also have women to have the design suited to the consumer need. So I think it's okay to have the bias sometimes to probably give the consumer what they want. Even for probably clothing, whatever you have, right? I think sometimes bias is good.
No, jewelry. I disagree with you. If you are watching the IPL, you will see the cricket players using more gold than women use actually.
Anyone else, especially from the automotive sector, do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think there is any bias in terms of the design and technology that comes in. Of course, depending on, like Priya said, the consumerism, what the consumer wants, there is always a maturity in the technology and additives being put in it. There is version 1, version 1.2 and so on. So that's always there.
But the point is that I don't think any technology is made keeping gender in view.
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't think so. In fact, going back in history, we talked about Industry 1.0, and this is the era of textile industry, and I think it was dominated more by women than men. And the reason being, I think the men were busy fighting the World War. And when the wars got over, men started coming back and women withdrew. And I think just the allocation of work happened accordingly. But otherwise, I think the women started in manufacturing much before men.
It's a very interesting perspective. Thank you for that. We'll now move on to the last question for the day. And now we're going to talk about, we spoke about a lot of initiatives, we spoke about a lot of different options of integrating ESG, considerations of maybe not bias into manufacturing. Now we will talk about how do we effectively measure these changes, because traditionally or even historically, finance has more or less streamlined, right? It's easier to measure tangible benefits and tangible outputs. But how do we measure these things that we're talking about right now, and how do we communicate those in an impactful way to the audience and to those stakeholders that we were talking about in the past? So I would like now for Anu to start us off on this discussion.
Sure, thanks. So I think the answer would be multi-dimensional here, because we are talking about several different aspects when we talk about impact. Impact can be both tangible and intangible, but how do you define what is impactful for you? And for that, you need to first of all have a very clear framework. So any organization first needs to define what does E, S, and G mean for them. And that has to be top driven. It cannot be bottom driven, because once the top management buys into the idea of ESG or sustainability and defines what all parameters would they like to work against, that's when they would set some goals, some targets for the organization. That's when you will put some monitoring systems in place, and that's where you will also involve the right stakeholders from within the organization. So that's one. Governance, I think, is the very first agenda that needs to be on top of the mind for anyone trying to initiate the process. And once you have put a governance in place, that means ESG committee, board involvement in terms of defining the targets and goals for the organization, and then cascading that down to each and every function. So defining the matrices, as I said before, and also data. Without data, we are only talking about stories. It's only English, I would say. And in order to effectively have control over the data, you need to have technology in place. So you cannot be dealing with humongous amounts of data in the form of Excel sheets. There is big room there for error, for missing out on certain important aspects, and missing out on being able to monitor it continuously. So what we have seen with with many companies that we worked with in the past, they were dealing with these Excel files. They were looking at data only at the end of the year when it was time for reporting, and hence missing out on any kind of gaps, deviations, and not being able to really get a handle on the matrices that they should have. Also, it's great to have a nice looking strategy, a good looking framework, and put it in your sustainability report. But then unless you define the goal and then you monitor it throughout the year, you will not know if you need any course correction through the year, right? And that's where most of the organizations fail to stick to what they committed to, right? Or to show a continuous improvement towards their goals. So three things, as I said: governance, defining your ESG goals, matrices, your parameters, and third, data management. And fourth, I would say capacity building throughout the organization. As Priya also mentioned, you cannot have one person, one individual, or one department even leading this for the entire organization. There can be one person holding the pen on it, just because you need someone to collate the data and being able to monitor it through the year. But then, unless each and every function understands what is their role in this larger scheme of things, you will not get what you want, from any of the functions. And we have seen this being implemented very successfully in very large organizations with multiple locations, where people from each function were identified to lead ESG for that department. Mm-hmm. They knew exactly what is to be provided. So for example, when you talk about ESG risks, or you talk about ratings, ESG ratings, you cannot possibly have a good ESG rating just by publishing a good report. You need to understand that when you define a goal, what is the role of the manufacturing, the plant head in that? What is the role of HR in that? When you talk about human capital, um, the engineering department may not have much role to play, but the HR does, the L&D does, right? When you talk about energy efficiency, HR may not understand much, but the plant head does. And they also, when you do these capacity building sessions, you also make them understand how well aligned ESG goals are with their own KPIs, right? So a lot of dimensions here that we need to cover when we talk about impact assessment.
Very true, very nice. Any other thoughts and closing comments?
I just want to add to that for a long time in our company we have been making the sustainability report as part of the financial integrated reporting. This is the first time since it became mandatory for an external auditor to audit the sustainability report, the BRSR. The auditor said to us, and I was very happy that she asked us to put that, is to track progress. Not just enough to put your final goals, saying, we're going to be net zero by this time, because I believe that there are lots of companies who have made a very irresponsible promises of putting 2050, 2040, 2060, etc., as their goal time. And reason I call it irresponsible is because many of those people who are making those promises probably will not be in that company, right? And they're making a promise just to tide over the promise that everybody is making. And I was very happy to see that they are going to now track the progress that you're making, and they're going to make a comment as an auditor, external auditor, whether this progress is good enough for you to meet your deadline or not. And that's what they're going to sign, and that's what is going to be part of the integrated report. I think that is a phenomenal step forward. That's going to force many of us to do things that even if we didn't want to do some of those. Because, there are business pressures, while she rightly talked about, its return in due course. The initial investment is huge, and that is a deterrent. Many would say postpone it because, everybody is under profit pressures, right? So that, and fortunately for me, in my experience, the sustainability and the CSR budget is one that we have agreed with everybody in the organization, from CEO to CFO to the board, that will not be touched even if we were to die without revenue.
To hear that.
Just to add to that, I think what happens when you have the report out in the public domain is your means of communicating with your stakeholders. So what we've also seen for a good organization is that have neutral reporting. It's not that you always have to have a report that only talks about your success stories and how good your case studies have been. So what the stakeholder also wants to see is the true story of your struggles. How has the progress been? Maybe there were some instances where the goal that you intended was not able to be achieved, but talk about it. Say that, look, this did not happen because of this, but we will pick that up, ensure that it happens. So neutral reporting against greenwashing is what stakeholders want to look forward to, because as you said, in terms of having ambitious goals, very long time goals, even having wrong claims is, will go against your entire reputation, and you'll be called out for something which you probably wouldn't even have thought of. So this whole concept of neutral reporting and continual, so you report, you have an annual report, we should have that continual reporting year on year, so that the stakeholders, or it could be anybody, or even your own employees trying to understand how you progress, they're actually feeling involved and they are part of your journey. I think
it shows the seriousness of the business in tracking the progress. Right? Like, I keep joking that you never meet your revenue and profit targets, but you track it.
I think,
right? Similarly, this also needs to be tracked. Even if you don't meet, it's okay, because, it shows the seriousness that, you are focused.
I think in closing, I would like to kind of summarize all that you've shared so far. There's a collective, there's an individual responsibility. I think we take away that as a manufacturing. We have a huge responsibility because we directly deal with the resources, both at the front end and the back end of what we take and also what we sell out. And so the thoughts about understanding our respective organizations' ESG reports, what are those KPIs, how does it apply to me, does it apply to me, having the right conversations, right level, and also applying that to our own personal lives. I think that's what overall I take away from this conversation. And also like a company like Cargill, right? Of course, we have released our ESG reports in the past 2 years, and it's been a huge learning. It's not been a first come, getting it right the first time onwards. It's been a huge learning, and we have done, I think, the teams that have been formed, the organizational goals that have been set, the teams that are here, including the plant managers, are well aware of the sustainability, the natural resource. We call them the natural resource goals instead of sustainability goals, and then it ties up to the higher level sustainability goals, the energy optimization, the importance of water. I think that's another very important aspect for manufacturing. The people capital that is being used. So HR teams are a very good examples of that. So in conclusion, I would like to conclude that we do have responsibilities, and it is not just a social, like a philanthropic responsibility. It's actually now being driven by stockholders, it's being driven by stakeholders, and it's going to be important for any business to continue operating in any space, anywhere in the world. And it's not just reputational, it's not just kind of good to know kind of a thing, but also now it's becoming regulatory, with the directives coming up from Europe, with other restrictions being placed from many other countries that we might be importing to or selling to or buying from. So in a lot of different ways, these changes are good. These changes are becoming very fast. And these changes can lead to some kind of, in unclarity or not being clear on what is being communicated. So I would encourage all of us going and taking away from this panel that we will make a change. We will take that, oath to kind of save this planet that we have, the one single planet that we have, for the future generations, as well as the next gen manufacturing teams. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, for guiding us through this thought-provoking panel discussion. I guess Anu, Ragini, Paneesh, and Priya have left us with a lot of food of thought of how we can commit to ESG and act responsibility, not just at organization level, but at individual level. I would now like to invite Vijay to hand over a token of appreciations to our panelists and Christina, and for a quick photo op.